All right, hey everyone, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling a topic a lot of you have been asking about, resilience. And I don't just mean bouncing back, but really using those challenges to, level up. We found some seriously interesting stuff digging through the research for this one, especially on how self-compassion plays a part, which I'm really excited to get into.
Oh, the level up thing is spot on, actually. The research really does talk about resilience being a process. It's dynamic, not about being tough and unbreakable all the time, but how you adapt and actually grow from setbacks.
Okay, so less like, I don't know, a brick wall, and more like, a bamboo forest maybe. Bends with the wind but never breaks.
Love that analogy. And since we're talking about bending, one of the key things they highlight is knowing your own emotional bend points, let's call it. That's where self-awareness is huge. If you know what your triggers are, how you tend to react under pressure, it's like having the instruction manual to your own stress response.
So before we even get to responding well, we've got to understand how we react almost instinctively.
Absolutely, because those knee-jerk reactions, often they're emotion-driven, can send us spiraling, if we aren't careful. And that's where this idea of emotional regulation comes in. Not about ignoring your feelings, but you choose how you respond instead of just letting emotions dictate what you do.
So let me see if I get this. Say, my default when criticized is to get all defensive and shut down. Emotional regulation would be like pausing, noticing that feeling. But maybe I choose to ask a question for clarification instead.
You got it. It's that gap between the thing happening and your reaction where you actually have the power to choose a better path, know? Now, another thing that came up a lot in the research was this idea of a growth mindset being crucial for resilience.
I've heard that term a million times, but honestly, sometimes it feels kind of vague, like a motivational poster, I get it in theory, but how do I actually use it when I'm in the middle of some huge setback?
And that's where we got to move past just the buzzword and into practical stuff. One technique they talk about is reframing your thoughts. So instead of getting stuck on, I failed, it's, what can I learn from this? What specific actions could I have taken differently? You're shifting from seeing it as a personal failure to seeing it as, hey, this is an opportunity to grow.
So instead of, I suck at this, it's more like, that one way didn't work. What other ways could I try?
Exactly. And it's not just about positive thinking either. They suggest things like journaling to process those emotions and get some perspective, or talking it out with a friend you trust, a mentor, someone who can give you that outside view.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that, right? Someone who's not in the thick of it to help you see the bigger picture. Because on your own, when you're stressed, that's hard to do.
Totally agree. Actually, one of the authors told this story, really brings this to life. They were talking about a project they poured everything into, just total flop. At first, they just wanted to give up completely, that feeling.
Oh yeah, when something blows up in your face and you just want to hide. Been there for sure. So what did they do? How they get past that feeling of defeat?
Well, what's so cool is they actually used that whole mess as a launching pad for growth. They took a step back, looked at what went wrong, figured out the specific lessons, and then actually applied those lessons to what they did next.
So they totally lived that whole growth mindset thing, not just talking about it. They didn't let that setback define them. They used it to move forward.
That's it. And that's a huge point. It's not about avoiding setbacks altogether. It's the response that matters. They become these opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow from.
This reminds me of in nature, how after a forest fire, it doesn't just vanish, it comes back, often even stronger and more diverse.
Perfect example. And it highlights another big idea from the research. You don't have to make some massive change overnight to build resilience. It's those small, consistent steps, kind of like how that forest slowly grows back. They encourage finding at least one positive thing, one learning opportunity in whatever you're going through, no matter how tough it seems.
So even when it feels like everything's a mess, there's always something to be learned from it. That's honestly pretty encouraging, especially when you're feeling down.
It really is. It's about finding those little bits of hope and using them to fuel you forward. They suggest simple stuff like gratitude journaling, connecting with your support system, setting small goals, achievable stuff. Even just one little action can create this ripple effect over time.
I love that, ripple effects. It's like that saying, journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, but applied to building resilience.
Exactly. And those small steps, if you're consistent, can lead to some really big changes in how resilient you are overall. Speaking of support, though, one of the sources really emphasized how important community is in all of this. We aren't meant to do this alone, right?
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was just thinking about that. We've talked about self-awareness, regulating your emotions, but then there's this whole other side of connecting with others, having that support system.
You need both, really. It's not like one is more important. Think of it this way. You build up your inner strength, your resilience, and that lets you show up better in your relationships. And then those relationships, they give you the support, the encouragement to keep going when things get rough. It's this beautiful back and forth. It really is kind of like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Resilience really does better when you've got people around you.
That's a perfect way to put it. So it's not about becoming some lone wolf, toughing it out solo, but like connection's a basic human need, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we're struggling.
Exactly. We need those outside perspectives to help us see things, the encouragement, that reminder that, hey, we're not the only ones going through tough stuff.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Self-awareness, emotional regulation, growth mindset, starting small, the power of community. But let's be real, even with all that, you can't avoid setbacks completely, can you? Life throws curveballs, sometimes you just strike out. So
Right.
then what? What happens when you do stumble, even if you're trying your best to be resilient?
And that's where some of the most interesting stuff from the research comes in. And it might surprise you. It's not about just gritting your teeth and pushing through. They actually challenge that whole toughness thing. They bring up something kind of unexpected as being central to resilience: self-compassion.
Whoa, okay, that is surprising. I always thought of self-compassion as, I don't know, almost kind of soft, like being nice to yourself when you're down.
Yeah.
But how does that fit with resilience, which seems more about being strong, persevering?
It's a cool connection, but it makes sense when you think about it. Like when you beat yourself up over a mistake, what happens? You dwell on it, get stuck in that shame and guilt, and moving on becomes way harder.
Ugh, yeah, know that feeling all too well. It's like that negative self-talk just drains all your energy, your motivation.
Right, but self-compassion, it offers a different way. It's realizing, hey, you're human, you're gonna mess up, and that's okay. You offer yourself grace, understanding, the same way you would to a good friend.
So instead of, ugh, I'm so dumb for doing that, it's, all right, didn't go as planned, but I learned something.
Yeah.
What can I do differently next time?
Exactly. You go from condemning yourself to encouraging yourself, from beating yourself down to lifting yourself up.
That is such a powerful shift, wow. It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect, and instead it's like focus on growth, on learning.
You got it. And it doesn't mean you're saying your mistakes don't matter or that you're off the hook. It's being accountable, but also treating yourself with kindness and understanding at the same time.
Okay, so we've got this link between self-compassion and resilience. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
But I think our listener might be wondering, all right, how do I actually do this? How do I practice self-compassion, especially when I'm feeling the opposite of compassionate towards myself?
Such a good question. And the first thing to remember is it's a skill, something you build up over time by actually doing it. It's not like you become this perfectly self-loving person overnight.
So where do you even start?
Yeah.
Any concrete steps to build that self-compassion muscle?
Well, one of the first things is just noticing that self-talk. When you screw up or things don't go your way, what's that voice in your head saying? Is it harsh, critical, judgmental? Just becoming aware of those negative thought patterns, that's huge.
So you become almost like an observer of your own thoughts, but without judging them.
Exactly, and once you see those negative thoughts, then you can start to challenge them. Ask yourself, is this even true? Would I say this to a friend? What's a more compassionate way to think about this?
Like, instead of, I can't believe I messed that up, I'm such a failure, it's maybe, okay, this didn't work out how I wanted, but it's a lesson learned. What'll I do differently next time?
You got it. It's shifting from putting yourself down to actually being your own cheerleader, your own support system.
This is also helpful. But what about those times when it's really bad, the negative thoughts are just overwhelming, and being compassionate to yourself feels impossible? What do you do then?
That's when some specific self-compassion practices can be super useful. One of the sources had a few techniques that I thought were really helpful. First one's called Common Humanity. It's about realizing you're not alone in your struggles. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has setbacks. It's remembering that being imperfect is part of being human.
So true. We always compare ourselves to everyone else's best moments, their highlight reel, and that makes us feel like we're not good enough, like we're the only ones struggling.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to remember that everyone's got their own stuff going on, their own challenges, even if they don't show it. The second technique they talked about is mindfulness, basically. You notice your thoughts and feelings without judging them, just observing them as they pop up. This can help you create some space between you and those negative thoughts so they don't feel so overwhelming.
So instead of getting carried away by that flood of self-criticism, you're creating a pause, just observing it without getting sucked in.
Exactly. And the third technique they talked about is self-kindness. It's treating yourself with the same care and compassion you'd give to someone you love. Think about it. What would you say to a friend going through the same thing? How would you comfort them? Then try giving yourself that same kindness and understanding.
Wow, yeah, we're often way harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else.
It's true, and by giving ourselves that same compassion, we create a more supportive environment inside ourselves, and that's key for building resilience.
I love that. Okay, so we've got these three techniques: common humanity, mindfulness, and self-kindness. I'm guessing the key is to practice these regularly, not just when you're already feeling down, right?
Absolutely. Self-compassion is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Even just taking a few minutes each day to think about these things, to remind yourself that you deserve kindness and understanding no matter what.
Such a simple but powerful practice. It makes me think how we're always focused on achieving things, getting validation from others. But sometimes the most important work is the work we do on ourselves, on building that inner strength and resilience.
That's exactly it. Resilience is about way more than just pushing through. It's about taking care of ourselves, accepting our imperfections, and realizing that real strength comes from within.
I love that. I think our listeners are probably feeling pretty inspired right now with all these insights and strategies.
I hope so. And remember, building resilience is a journey, not a destination. It's about showing up for yourself consistently, even when it's hard, and remembering that you have the strength to overcome any challenge that comes your way.
That is such a great message. Before we get to our final takeaway, I just want to remind everyone listening that we've covered a lot today. And it's okay if you need a minute to process it all.
Definitely don't feel like you have to do everything at once. Pick one or two things that resonate with you and start there.
And remember, it's about progress, not perfection.
Well said. Now, you mentioned a final takeaway. What's the one thing you want our listeners to really hold on to from all of this?
If I had to pick just one thing I want people to walk away with, it's that resilience isn't about being invincible, It's more about embracing the whole process of adapting and growing when you hit those challenges.
Yes. And one thing that really stood out in what we read is how important flexibility is in that whole process. They talk about not getting too attached to one specific outcome or having one rigid plan, because, let's be honest, life rarely goes exactly how we think it will.
Right, so it's less about having this detailed roadmap and more like having a compass that points you in the right direction, but you're open to detours and unexpected turns along the way.
Exactly. It's that ability to bend without breaking, to adjust when things change without losing sight of the bigger goal. One author even compared it to a willow tree, strong and resilient, but it bends with the wind so it can survive even the worst storms.
I love that image. So it's not about trying to control every little thing in our lives, but learning to kind of flow with the ups and downs, be flexible.
Exactly, and that takes a willingness to let go a little bit, to accept that you can't control everything,
Which can be hard, especially these days when everything seems to value being predictable, having stability.
It can be tough, but it's kind of paradoxical. Often when you let go is when you discover your real strength, your resilience.
So it's about being okay with the unknown, accepting that some things you just can't control, and trusting that you can handle whatever happens.
Exactly. And that trust in yourself, that belief in your own resilience, that's what ultimately lets you thrive even when things are tough.
That's such a good point. So to wrap up our deep dive into resilience, I want to leave everyone with a little something to think about, a challenge of sorts. Think back to a challenge you faced recently, something that really pushed you. Now, how could you look at that experience differently? See it as an opportunity to grow. What's one small thing you could do today, right now, to build that willow tree flexibility, that resilience muscle?
What a great question to ponder. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. The most important thing is to just start,
Yeah.
to make that choice, to build resilience into your life.
Couldn't said it better myself. So on that note, we'll leave you to think about that. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and as always, keep being awesome.
It's been great diving deep with you.